Day one of the third test between the West Indies and England in Grenada, and this is Ask George. Okay, the first question that we've got today, George, comes from Rumel Rahman, and Rumel is just asking, what have we learned today?
Good question. We probably learned that the progress we thought England had made isn't as pronounced as maybe we might have hoped or presumed. We probably learned just how flat the wickets were in Barbados and Antigua, if we didn't know already. And we learned that there's still a fragility in the England batting. But I think we also learned there's a bit of fight. And actually, I've got lots of queries about what happens next in this game. I actually thought it was quite a hard wicket to read. You know, everyone said it started damp, but there are no marks on it. There's no marks on it. And if it's a damp wicket, you get footmarks almost immediately, even indentations. Wasn't a lot of sign of that. I don't know really how it's going to play tomorrow, but the players of both sides reckoned it would stay difficult for batters throughout the game, may even get worse. So we should probably not jump to too many conclusions about any of it right now.
The old wait till both teams have batted, is that it?
Well, I hate to say that because it's such a cliche, but yeah. Do you hear the sudden rain shower, by the way?
Yeah.
It's been very humid. And whether that is relevant at all, I don't know. But it is a very, very beautiful country. And if you have the green and all the colour that you have here, I guess you need a bit of rain as well.
Simon Stokes is asking, dodgy pitch or just normal batting from England?
It's definitely a difficult pitch. It's definitely difficult. There was very, very sharp seam movement at times. And I thought that the West Indies bowlers have been pretty good all series. I think Jayden Seales is a real find. I mean, I think he's 20, isn't he? Hardly played any first-class cricket. He looks like he's got a lot of skill. He had a reputation for taking the ball away from the batter. Today he's seamed it in so well and so sharply. And Mayers as well. I think I wrote in my piece that he reminded me a bit of Darren Stevens. He did. Just wobbling it around, giving a bit of movement. It's all very well to say it's not that quick and stuff, but actually it's very difficult to play. So it was definitely a testing wicket. It wasn't probably 114 for 9 wicket. I thought there were some loose shots, definitely some loose shots. I mean, going back to the first question, it still looks as if some of those England batters are exposed when the ball moves because they play beyond their limitations, maybe. And I think the reason Jack Leach in particular prospered was that he stuck within his limitations. And he obviously quite limited, but he looks to get forward, he keeps his bat and pad close together, he doesn't follow the ball. He goes into a forward press basically every shot, doesn't he? And so there was an element of error about a lot of those dismissals. But it's definitely a tricky batting surface. And again, we'll have to see a bit what happens next.
Do you think there was some inconsistent bounce? I mean, there was a ball very early on from Kamal Roach, which seemed to only get up about 6 inches off the ground. And I think Joe Roots looked like he might have kept a little bit lower than he was anticipating. He was a bit on the back foot when he got a nick through on there. Was there an element of inconsistent bounce, or would that be an unfair?
I think there was. No, I thought there was, but I haven't seen any data on that at this stage. But I to the naked eye, I did think that. What I would say though is, when Ben Folkes, for example, was bowled, and Craig Overton, both times I thought, oh, that's kept low. And then you look at the replay and it's hit the very top of the stumps. It was actually more about the seam movement in than any sort of up and down bounce. But there was definitely a bit, yeah, there was. And once variable bounce starts, it tends to only go one way. It is possible that pitches just die, but there are some cracks there, and that is something that England could probably take some comfort in, because you wouldn't necessarily expect that it will get better. And that is the reputation of the surface here as well, that people say it gets more difficult to bat on as the game goes on.
Well, I think we've addressed this a little bit already, but Daniel Chapman asks, has Jack Leach got a better defensive game than England's top 7?
Well, I don't know, because he just plays his defensive game most of the time, doesn't he? So if Joe Root or Ben Stokes or something, I think Ben Stokes might have the best technique in the side. But if they just settled upon defence, then they'd probably be very, very tight, but they're always looking to score, which isn't such a bad thing. But it is true that Jack Leach, not for the first time, looked a perfectly competent lower order player, and he did a really, really important job for England today. So I think it was a lot more difficult when the ball was harder and jagging around much more sharply. But I wouldn't want to take anything away from him. I think he's having a really good tour, but maybe the biggest test is yet to come.
You mentioned Ben Stokes having perhaps the best technique. What went wrong with his dismissal? It just looked at all sorts.
Well, slightly hard to tell whether there was a bit of irregular bounce there or uneven bounce, whether it came off at a different speed to the way he was expecting, or whether he just wasn't set enough to play that shot. But you would think that those sorts of shots would be more high risk on a wicket, which isn't absolutely true in its pace and bounce. And I suspect that's what happened. He might as well just have not given himself enough time to get in, but he's human. These things happen.
You got caught up in the innings in Barbados, maybe trusting the pitch a lot more then and going into a different environment. Can that make such a big difference in a short space of time?
Maybe, because he looked $1 million, didn't he, in Barbados? Almost immediately. I mean, he did play himself in, but he did look very good very soon in Barbados. But there was no lateral movement there. And not, I don't think he was particularly done by lateral movement, to be fair. But they're very different circumstances. Look, it might just have been an error. He might just have mistimed it. But I suspect it came through a little bit, not quite as he expected.
Joel Edwards asks, if Ed Smith returns, could Chris Woakes become a specialist number 8 batsman? And I think this is referring to some suggestions that Ed Smith is in line as one of the candidates for the next managing director at the ECB. I don't know if you've got any particular info on that as well, George.
Yeah, I think there's a few people. I mean, I haven't actually phoned everyone and asked them whether, I mean, I can if you want me to, by the way, if they've applied. But I mean, the names I'm hearing are sort of Marcus North, perfectly sensible. Tom Moody might even want to do the coaching role instead. Again, very good. Mark Nicholas, Mike Hesson, Rob Key, of course, and Ed Smith. I mean, I think Ed is, Ed as a person is extremely charming and nice, but I thought as an administrator or a selector, he was deeply flawed. And I'm a bit surprised that Andrew Strauss is as keen on him as he seems to be. But I mean, some of Andrew Strauss's references, terms, I mean, he's been out of the game a little while, and sometimes he seems a bit off the pace, to be honest. I mean, this Brailsford stuff, crikey. So if Ed came back, my issue with Ed as a selector was he had his favourites, and he used to try and find space. In fact, we were talking about this in the press box today when they started picking Joe Denley. He said he's got a unique skill set as a batter who bowls spin. Samit, Moeen, Adil Rashid, Dobell. I mean, there were really genuinely quite a lot of people. It's probably the 4th best, isn't it? Or no, maybe it isn't. But it just surprised me, and I always thought he was trying to be a bit clever. I'd be a bit surprised if he got the job, but I think he's probably there or thereabouts. I think I've given you all the names that I know that are there on the list.
Ben Rigby's asking, can Zach Crawley make a career out of occasional centuries and abundant single-figure scores?
I was going to write on this today, but obviously other stuff happened. So I'll use this line in a piece one day. But I think Hutton was asked about Cowdrey, and he was asked if he were as good as Hammond, I think. And he said, Wally was hungry. And I know exactly what he means. Zach Crawley is a batter that's hard not to fall in love with. He hits the ball he times the ball so beautifully. He's clearly a nice fella. Everyone wants him to do well. Just wish he were hungrier. I wish he was bloody greedy. I wish that he, I mean, no one wanted to put away those lovely drives, but today he gave it away. And it made a big, big difference though, because they just about got through the first hour. I think they were 56 minutes, weren't they?
Yeah, it's just over 12 overs in.
Yeah, and he was impatient. He didn't think a bowler like Mayers should be bowling to him, I think, which is odd because he's played his whole career with Darren Stevens at Kent. And he knows that you have to respect those bowlers. And he tried to hit him off his length, didn't he? He came down the wicket a little bit. And and he didn't quite get there. And, spoon to catch to cover. It's a frustrating dismissal because he can do it. But the thing I would say is, the thing to remember is, during the Ashes, Saqib Mahmood looked as if he were absolutely at the limit of his ability in trying to deal with the pace. He just looked like he was on him too fast. And Zach Crawley always has time on the ball. He's just got time to play it. And I know that's basic. It's a bit like saying a bowler can bowl 5 miles an hour faster, but it matters. So he can do it, and I understand why they're sticking with him. But, I wish he were hungrier.
Can we give some credit to Mayers for that dismissal? Because he mixed his lines
definitely.
and his lengths as well. It wasn't just Crawley playing a rash shot.
You're really right to pick me up on that. Yes, categorically yes. I mean, nearly every dismissal is a combination of cunning or quality bowling and batter error. And this is no difference. But that's exactly what Mayers does. He's a canny operator, and he preyed on a weakness. But I think you've got to make it a bit harder sometimes for bowlers to get you out. And he didn't really make him work, did he? Didn't he have 2 for naught after his first 5 over spell? But look, the ball to Joe Root was very good as well. It's angled in, held its line a little bit after pitching. It looks a bit dibbly-dobbly maybe if you see a replay, but try facing it. It's good bowling.
It was a nice little mixture of sort of leg cutters or scrambled seam and then induckers and some decent line and leg.
You may have seen that a lot better because at that stage of the day we didn't have a TV in the press box, and the press box is outside as well. So we don't have the facilities that, I mean, it's lovely to be outside. But it is, you don't get all the stuff that you might get if you were at Edgbaston or Old Trafford.
We should point one other thing with Mayers, because I was really impressed that first spell today. Just flicking through his wickets, he's only had 15 Test wickets, but of those, 3 of them are of the top 6 in the ICC rankings in terms of Root, Babar Azam and Dimuth Karunaratne. And he's also got Elgar and de Kock in Tests as well. Not bad for a guy who's only got 15 Test wickets, that are a third of them are of that world-class calibre of batsman. He's obviously got something about him. Maybe Darren Stevens should have been brought into this England team all those years ago. Well,
maybe, but I mean, it depends where you play. I suspect Darren Stevens and Mayers wouldn't have looked great on the Barbados pitch. So, and equally, I think if you took Darren Stevens to Australia, he would. I think he would admit that he would have a hard time there. But I'm sure he would. I've had that conversation with him. But he wouldn't let them down either. There are other people doing what he does. I mean, de Granton bowls something similar, maybe, doesn't he? And if there's any help in the pitch, you take advantage. But he has played on the most helpful pitch in the series by miles. I don't remember those dismissals of the previous batters you were talking about, but I wonder if they were sort of this guy shouldn't be bowling to me type dismissals, which I thought was the case with Crawley a little bit. But having said that, Crawley probably just really doesn't fancy that sort of bowling. I mean, like Stokes, they prefer the ball coming on, as lots of good players do. It was a very county cricket dismissal.
Should we give a little bit of credit to the West Indies for their selection in terms of their bowling lineup? Obviously, winning the tosses was important today, but they also had to pick the right team to do it, and the way that Brathwaite used his bowlers for the first 2 sessions at least, before things started to fall apart a bit.
Yeah, I mean, up to a point. As I say, I think Seals looks terrific. I think Kemo Roach looks exhausted. He's getting slower by the day, isn't he? He's obviously a really skillful bowler, but I thought they did lack a spinner, to be fair. I mean, you can't get everyone in the side, but, the 10th wicket partnership did add 90. And at times, it made West Indies look a wee bit ragged. So they had one weapon and they played it. And after they looked really, really exhausted. So I think there's some stuff there that can possibly be exploited by England as the game goes on. They maybe won't lack the spin, but they will lack someone to bowl tight holding overs and rotate the seamers and stop them looking as jaded as they did here. It's 3 back-to-back tests. I'm knackered. These fellas running around outside in the sun. Wow. So they've worked so hard. It showed, didn't it, in the last couple of hours?